cannabis is the most popular illegal drug in Britain. I'm Professor Green, and over the years, I've had a long relationship with weed. Before I was a musician, I sold weed. And from 16 to 24, I smoked weed every day. In Britain today, the cannabis industry is booming.
Everyone's up for my weed always goes out quick.
Edibles, hash, seeds, synthetics, weed.
It's like being in Amsterdam, but online.
It's like Aladdin's cave. Ooh.
A lot's changed since my time, and I want to know how today's market operates. I want to discover what weed is now, and not just what it is as a substance, but what it is in the eyes of people. Is it all good times, or is there another side to the drug?
I've done all of the drugs, and it was weed that brought me to my knees.
You never really think of cannabis as being the drug that could be that problem.
At a time when cannabis laws around the world are evolving,
after midnight, recreational marijuana became legal in California.
What's happening here in Britain?
Making something illegal, it's the dumb option, because you're basically handing the whole industry to criminals.
Like really new hippies. This is how hippies look nowadays.
As behaviour outstrips the law.
My neighbours know I grow my own. They know I'm not a bad guy.
Should we legalise weed?
There's so much information, it almost makes it difficult to see it for what it is.
All my down dogs still kicking with me. All my down hoes still tricking with me. All my real smokers know they ain't passing nothing but dope and D. Real tree.
Listening to that proper, I haven't heard it in ages. I don't know why either. It's something I used to go back to all the time. So, I mean, if you look at the album cover, there's obviously one reference that pops up quite often is, you know, weed. There's a lot of weed references in it. That wasn't a reason for liking it though, musically, just as a fan. Dre is one of the best producers ever. My name being Professor Green, as you can imagine, I know quite a lot about weed. There was a time when I was fully immersed in it, be it the selling of it, the buying it, the smoking it. And I think because of that, and because of people's awareness of my relationship with the drug cannabis, that they think this documentary is going to be me going, I'm pro-legalisation, I'm pro-weed. It's not going to be that at all. I've had good and bad experiences with the drug. Nowadays, it makes me uncomfortable, it makes me paranoid, it makes me anxious, which is not what it should do. It's not the same anymore. I've been well removed from that world for a long time, and a hell of a lot has changed, from legalisation to how people consume it to the amount of strains there are. Everything's different. I really want to know what's going on. When I was a dealer, most of the cannabis I sold came from abroad. But more people have learned to grow it themselves, and around 80% of cannabis sold in Britain is now grown here. I'm meeting a dealer-turned-grower who cultivates his own supply in several spots across the Midlands.
I've not actually been inside a grow before, so this will be a first for me.
He's asked to be called Mr. X, and understandably, he's a bit shy.
Come on, sis.
So this is the operation, yeah?
It's not a real one.
The grow which Mr. X has agreed to show me is in his spare bedroom.
This is a turn up of thinking here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How long have you been growing for?
In total, about 2 years.
Yeah. And what kind of clientele?
Solicitors, raidman, shop assistants, obviously. Everyone's after my weed always goes out quick.
What would you be looking at if you got caught with this?
If I got caught, I get about 2-3 years. So, I ain't nowhere. I'm not taking from nobody. I'm not stealing. I'm not even rigging up my electric. I pay for it.
And what's the alternative if you weren't doing this?
If I weren't doing this, I'd get a 9 to 5 which I've had. But, like, as far as they're concerned, I'm a criminal, and that's all I'll ever be to them. And off this, I can make up to 20 bags easily off what I've got in here, easier. And that's the years of literally somebody that I can make in a few months.
In the eyes of the law, what you're doing is illegal and you're making quite a bit more than the average wage.
It's not for me, my money's not for me, man. It's my youth. More than anything, I don't need money. Like my daughter, I'm gonna have to pay for her to drive and things my safe for football and things like that, you get me? I have to be able to cover all them things without worrying. Part of the life of living it. So we take the risk for a reason. No one wants to be already. No one wants to be illegal. You're just in a position where you have to do what you have to do, man.
How do you feel about it if it ends up being legalised?
No, it's not gonna help, man, I'm real. I'm not gonna get no license to sell weed or grow weed. Ever. So, if they legalise weed over here, which they are going to one day, no matter what anyone else thinks, a lot of people are gonna go out of business. They're gonna crack down on growers and not harder than they are already. Definitely, I don't want it to be legal. I know that much.
Even though I never grew weed, there are similarities between the grower and I. You know, my options weren't great, but one that was available to me was selling weed. And it was, at the time, a seemingly easy way to make a good bit of extra money. I'm not surprised that he's not a fan of the idea of legalisation, because he's probably not a person that stands to benefit. And, you know, if he isn't, then it would remove him of his livelihood.
Despite it being a Class B illegal drug, we consume around 270 tons of cannabis a year in Britain. Like Mr. X's customers, the consumers are a diverse crowd. I'm meeting a couple of girls who smoke cannabis every day.
Hi. How you doing? I'm Stephen.
Amy, how are you?
Nice
to meet you.
Good, thanks.
Come on in. Stephen, this is my friend Kat.
How you doing, Kat?
Stephen.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Take a seat.
The rose in the bong.
I know. Well, actually, someone bought me this bong the other day, which I think is so beautiful. I was just eyeing it up in the shop going, oh my God, have you ever seen a more beautiful bong? I thought, actually, it was a nice pass for now.
Yeah, sure.
So is this the first spliff of the day?
For me, it is. I normally would have maybe had a spliff by now.
So when do you consume? Are you all day or evenings only?
Me, but no, I like to smoke in the day because I make jewellery. I'm quite creative for my job. So for me, it kind of gets me into a really nice headspace.
Do you worry at all about what people outside of this room might think? So people that you may work with, people that may employ you?
I think it's more of a big deal than people actually feel about it. I've never come across anybody that's super offended by it. My boss knows about it, like my friends know, and my dad knows.
I'm quite open with where I'll smoke. I'll walk down, Oxford Street at 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and I'll be smoking a joint.
On Oxford Street?
Yeah, I used to work
I used to smoke in Soho.
I really don't think twice about it, but I think that maybe because I might not look like your average stoner, they're probably not going to think it's me. I'm like that blonde girl walking down the street. Like, they'll probably, no offence to like that poor rude boy walking next to me. They're probably not that I'm trying to, but like unfortunately, I've never
so
had.
So you're to blame for the reason people get stopped and searched.
Yeah, maybe, but like it's
someone's smoking weed, probably him. Yeah. How do you feel about that aspect of it? Like, how would you feel if you got arrested for smoking weed?
I'd be so insulted. I mean, I don't even like calling it a drug, to be honest. I don't say I do drugs. I say I smoke a plant. Like, what other drug makes you want to have a laugh with your friend and playing the guitar or like doing a painting?
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I love weed and I just want to buy it from my mate who sells it.
A lot of people associate like drug dealing with criminals and they don't trust those people. I love the guys that do it to me. I really get on with them and I always have like...
But then there's a different side to what they have to deal with that you don't see.
Yeah. And I guess none of us particularly know where our weed is coming from. We don't know the guy who's growing it. We haven't seen his setup. We don't know his lovely garden, if he's just a really keen gardener. I don't know, obviously, where it's coming from, but I almost feel like I enjoy the thought of that. Yeah. Happy days.
Happier? Amy and Kat, they're really I guess they're quite naive in a sort of blissfully unaware way. They live in their little kind of weed bubble. They don't seem to be aware of any of the risks associated with it, not with the growing or the selling. But I don't know, maybe attitudes on cannabis are changing. Maybe it is becoming more widely socially acceptable. Maybe there are many more people who feel that way about smoking weed as and when they please, even if it's on Oxford Street.
If smoking weed seems less taboo, the British cannabis market reflects that. It's now estimated to be worth several billion pounds. So huge, it's now counted in the country's GDP. There's a lot of people getting high, and even sharing it on social media.
That's the shit.
One of the fastest growing areas of the market is online. Every month, Brits buy almost £2 million worth of drugs this way. The consumer can get their hands on a massive range of cannabis without even leaving the house. I've got in touch with journalist and author Mike Power. He writes about the drugs trade and has expert knowledge of the dark web.
On this gloriously glum day, Mike, what are we up to?
We're going to go and visit a contact of mine, a guy I've done a couple of stories with in the past. And it kind of shows the current reality of the way many people buy cannabis in Britain. It's going to show us how he buys cannabis on the internet and has it delivered to his house by the Royal Mail.
Is this like via someone, like personal messaging, someone he knows who sells drugs, or is it?
No, it's something called, it's a darknet market.
How do you know who's trustworthy?
There's a feedback system. It's like eBay. I mean, it's like when you buy stuff on eBay. How do you know who's trustworthy on eBay? You know, you look at the previous record. You look
so
at. So
you can see how many sales someone's had.
Yeah, exactly that.
Can you leave reviews?
Yeah, you leave reviews like stars, like 5-star. You say whether it was good quality, if it was a nice smoke. It's funny though because the very first thing ever bought and sold on the internet was cannabis, and that was in 1971. You know, the very first thing ever bought, not like the first drug ever sold, the first thing. There were only five computers in the world at that time online, and the first two of them that got together to have a chat was to try and buy some cannabis.
So yeah, if you look in the market here, this is online market.
So we're on Dream Market at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This is on a Tor browser.
Right.
Buying cannabis on the dark web means a huge choice as well as quality and convenience. Mike's contact, who wants to protect his identity, is a family man who buys for personal use.
All over again.
Right.
So we go into the cannabis section. I mean, there's 41,000 drug deals available on this site, and 11,000 of them are for cannabis. So there's all of the different ones.
And it breaks it down as well, doesn't it? So there's 11,309 dealers of cannabis, edibles, hash, seeds, synthetics, weed.
And that's quite different, isn't it? Instead of like going to like a normal kind of weed dealer, you just get what you're given.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the choice is with you, yeah?
Yeah.
That's good.
And which for most weed dealers is they get what they can get.
Yeah.
No one's got this much of, no one person has got this much of a selection.
It's like being in Amsterdam, but online. You can get exactly what you want.
Mm.
How are the reviews of that? What have the other customers said that have bought this?
So, 5 stars, spot on weight, it was a great smoke, highly recommended, back for some more. Hash is beautiful, really fucks you up this one. Got a sample of Himalayan. Everyone's 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars.
How worried are you that instead of this turning up, it might be a copper at the door?
Not really, because it's the likelihood of getting caught, I think, is pretty slim with the amount of Amazon packages and other such stuff coming through the post every day. The likelihood is very little.
It seems like every part of the cannabis market is thriving. With so much choice and availability, I want to get a sense of who's running some of the criminal distribution and find out how it works.
We're going to go and meet, I suppose, the area managers of a network of marijuana growers and dealers. So they're a little bit higher up the chain than the people we've encountered so far.
Do you feel at all apprehensive going into the situations we're going into?
I like to think that the people that I'm working with have done their job properly and made sure that they're not walking me into anything too dodgy.
Hello?
Hello, mate. You all right? It's Stephen. What do you want me to do?
Well, turn out the road, you see a right down there, do that right. Say, when you come in, you got no phones, you got to leave your phone, yeah?
Yeah, cool, no drama. Alright, mate, see you in a minute. Bye. So how big is the operation? How many steps between you lot and it getting handed down to someone on the road?
To the street?
Yeah.
5, 6. So I suppose it's a bit like a pyramid scheme, isn't it? I'm the top. Yeah, multi-level market. Yeah. As long as I get my money, and that's it.
So for the most part, what do people want at the moment? What's the lay of the land? Do people want mellow?
They want to get fat. They want to go fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. They want to get off their nut. Do you know what I mean? Who am I to tell them?
But then don't you think that brings a negative aspect to the plant if it's for escapism rather than enhancement?
Well, they're going to escape. They will escape. Do you know what I mean? So rather than escaping something that's natural, they're escaping to crack and heroin. Yeah? That's what I'm saying. It's a fucking plan. When I first started, somebody showed me how to grow it. The money wasn't my sole gain.
It's a big part of it, huh?
It started, you know, I've made lots of money, I've lost lots of money. But 5 years ago, I got raided. It cost me 250 grand.
Bloody hell. What's the biggest risk for you, like, though? Robbers or police?
All these fuckers go around robbing them, don't they? Do you know what I mean? And you got to say, like, these kids now, like, they've got more balls than we used to, I can tell you. They'll come down, they just keep the door through, and then they're gone. And they're gone. And we know, sometimes we know who they are, but you don't just go around busting people out in their phones, don't you? Do you know what I mean? I'm a vegan, man, I don't want to hurt nothing, do you know what I mean? I ain't like that. The last one that we had, a lady in there in her 50s, knocked on a door, she opened it, 3 fellas threw battery acid over her.
Fucking hell. That's a lady in her 50s.
Yeah. A lady in her 50s. So there is...
Well, that's the part of the plant that's not that peaceful.
It ain't the plant's fault. Do you know what I mean?
It's the business behind it, isn't it? I've encountered violence in my time selling drugs. There's nothing nice about having people stick guns in your face and being robbed, believe me, but nothing as severe as having acid chucked in my face. I think what will probably shock a lot of people was how blasé they were about it. You know, there's this ideal about weed being this plant of peace, but it's money motivated, and for money, people will go to great lengths to make or take it. And that's the sad, horrible truth about the other side of weed.
I want to know what lengths people are prepared to go to get a slice of the pie. So I've negotiated a meeting with one of the most feared players.
Right now we're off to meet someone who is a robber. He's a jacker. It's not something I agree with, but it's as much a part of drug dealing as selling drugs as what can you do? You work outside of the law, there are no laws. It's a dirty part of the business.
The robber has only agreed to meet me if he's covered up from head to toe.
What's that? Cool. So, do you rob growers? Do you rob people?
I'm of the person to find out who grows weed, and then I just rob people really. When I find the right time to get it, just go in that night, pop the door. Hopefully no one's in there.
Alright, so what's your moral code, if any, then?
If there's women and children, mainly try to stay out of it. Like, you can run up in there and the kid's right there. It's like, I want to avoid that situation, you know? Yeah. I just want to do a clean. Mine especially is clean hits. Yeah.
I meant conscience-wise, though, because you're the worst thing that could happen to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's true. You work for your thing, you're happy with it. And
then someone comes along and takes it.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right, don't get me wrong. But people that do big grows have got money in it. So I ain't got as much money as you, I want to take it.
What sort of situations have you run into, if it or has it gone wrong?
Yeah, it's gone wrong. It's gone wrong a couple of times. There's been bloodshed. There's been bloodshed and running up in grows and ended up stabbing each other, and it's gone the wrong way. I try and see if it's worth it, innit? If I can tell,
there's two people in there with big machetes, and I know they're crazy. Yeah, they're gonna give it a good fight, see if it's worth it. How much can I get off that crop? How big is the crop?
What's the biggest crop you found?
The biggest crop I found was that we made from it 800,000.
800 grand?
Yep. Yep, that was a big grow. Like, I've heard of grows like over £1 million worth of weed.
And how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to do?
It depends. If I ever came across that, I'm willing to go all out in it. But if it's...
Would you be prepared to kill a man?
If it came across, I don't know, man. If I hit, at the end of the day, if I'm running in there and he's pointing something at me and I'm pointing the same thing back at him, someone's got to go on it, honestly.
What you have there is exactly what an illegal market creates. And you know, I don't need to tell you, people that I've spoken to have told us that they're more worried about him than they are about the old bill. If it was legalised, would that remove that situation from ever occurring? I can't answer that question, I don't know, but all of the money that is made illegally by weed could go to better use if it was sold legally, taxed properly, and put back into the communities that need it the most.
I do think there are some valid reasons to legalise cannabis, but one of the biggest arguments against is the drug's harmful effects. I was surprised to learn more than 1 in 10 regular users become dependent on cannabis. I've been invited to a meeting of Marijuana Anonymous to hear from some of those people.
Hi everyone, so my name is Claire.
I'm Mike.
My name's Robert, and I'm a marijuana addict.
Do you think, beginning to use marijuana, do you think it started out innocently?
Yeah, it was great, you know, go over to the park on a Friday afternoon, you know, smoke a few joints with my pals.
I'll never forget the first spliff that I had. I shared it with my sister. It was kind of like that relief of when you've been hearing an alarm going off in the background for like hours and hours, and the moment it stops, it's like, shh.
It's the first time in my life I just felt like amazing, like everything was just, any issues I'd ever had just completely gone. And from that moment, I think I smoked every day for 24 years.
How did you find your way here?
I'd start to, you know, smoke weed a lot more in the daytimes and then start to smoke it in the morning, so I'd be getting up, waking and baking.
What I started to do was only smoke alone. My world became really small.
And then I started to do really weird stuff, and I'd start to encourage an argument with my other half so I can leave the house and go and get high.
With 2 years into a relationship, my girlfriend's got pregnant. She's like, right, you need to start smoking now. And I'm like, yeah, I will when the baby comes, you know. And I genuinely meant it as well. I'm in the hospital, had a baby, she's had a cesarean. I fucking want to just get out there and have a spliff.
I would go to great lengths to score. I would mix with people that I felt dangerous and uncomfortable with.
And the baby came home and like, I know we've got a baby, but why can't I just smoke weed? And I kicked her out. I've thrown my missus out of the house with the little one because I can't smoke weed.
I started feeling like suicidal, you know, over weed of all things. I've done all of the drugs, and it was weed that brought me to my knees, weed that really got me to a point where I started to think, fuck it, shall I just do myself in?
I feel quite drained, to be honest with you. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me. You never think of, and that's probably the most dangerous thing about it, is you never really think of cannabis as being the drug that could be that problem, because it is more socially accepted.
Before the session, I didn't think I'd relate to any of their stories, but I did. It's made me think more about my past relationship with cannabis.
Hi there, Mandy's ready for you now.
Thank you.
and I've arranged to talk to addiction expert and therapist Mandy Saligari.
Hi, how you doing? Stephen, nice to meet you.
Hello, come on in.
Cheers. Does cannabis addiction exist?
Yes. Okay. Cannabis addiction exists in that if I use cannabis on a regular basis to fend off the negative emotion, I will create a dependence. And that dependence then starts to turn into if you like, an emotional, psychological addiction. So we have two addictions. We have a physical addiction at a cellular level, which is the easiest one to treat. And then you have the psychological addiction, which is about who am I? How do I feel about myself? And how do I fit? And when you have a drug medicating that part of somebody, then you're really in trouble.
But what I'd like to determine then was, where I smoked weed, how I did, was it an addiction? I ask you because I smoked my first spliff at 11. At 13, I started to smoke regularly. By 16, I think it was 16, I was selling it, so it was always around me, and it was pretty much a morning to night thing.
Yes, having that makes you high risk. When people graduate from smoking weed into dealing, I think there's a real identity thing there. It's about control, do you know what I mean?
I felt like I grew a pair of bollocks.
Yeah.
To be blunt, I did.
That kind of,
Because there was obviously not growing up with a dad at home, there was a lot of insecurity.
Where was your mum?
There, but not. She was the first person to leave the household. My great-grandmother often took the care of me while my nan was at work. And she passed away when I was 13, which was also when I pretty much stopped going to school.
And started really smoking weed.
Shit, yeah.
I mean, I hear vacancy, I hear rejected by mum. The addict profile is one where they are self-reliant yet insecure, because originally I was let down. So fundamentally, the only person I can rely on is me. So you form a relationship with something that becomes your prop. Yes, we're talking addiction, because there is an original wounding that isn't attended to.
Going into that, I didn't really know what to expect. You know, I don't, to my knowledge, have an addictive bone in my body. But maybe that was part of me smoking weed. Maybe it was me nullifying everything, you know, quietening all those worries and anxieties and resentments in my head. I didn't really think about that until sitting in there.
So what happens if it is legalised? It just becomes another one of those things that's normalised. Would you just see more and more people using it to plaster over their problems?
There's a hell of a lot to take in, and I'm finding it pretty hard to see a clear line for it all.
The reason that I find this part tough is because there is conflict, genuinely, because there are positives and there are negatives to both sides. So with legalisation comes some positives. In some people's eyes, those positives are it would take cannabis out of the hands of criminals, and it would lower the violence or stop the violence that occurs because of cannabis-related violent crimes. But that's not to say that there's not negatives to making something legal, because we've met people who, you know, have suffered very, very, very negative effects of smoking weed. For some people, weed has been incredibly detrimental to their lives. And with legalisation,
I imagine it will push a lot of people who are on the street selling weed into selling harder drugs.
So would it not be irresponsible to make something that can cause that much harm even more accessible? It's a tough one.
One place in the world that has already made some big decisions about legalization is America. More and more US states are legalizing cannabis, and a huge amount of money is going back into the public purse. If cannabis was legalized in Britain, it would raise an extra £1 billion a year in taxes, according to a recent study. But while it remains illegal, some Brits are already making money out of it. Gavin Nathan, a former Tesco and Facebook exec, is helping wealthy clients invest their money in the booming American market. He's also opened a cannabis dispensary, in Las Vegas.
Gavin, good morning. How you doing? You all right?
Good, thanks. Yeah.
Good to meet you. Tell me, how did you come to, because this is all new to me, the potential legalisation, people wanting to invest in it. How did you get involved in the idea of setting up a legal marijuana business in the UK?
I read some research about what was happening in the cannabis industry in the US. We know that there is about $50 billion worth of demand for cannabis in the US.
Wow.
And that's primarily through illegal channels right now. And so moving that into these legal channels means it's a huge economic opportunity for businesses.
How long has the dispensary in America been open?
So the dispensary's been open for a couple of weeks, and it's a completely different experience to the one that we have here in the UK, where you have to go and find a guy on a street. There's some photos of our dispensary. A spaceman in there.
As you do.
Yeah. When they come in, it feels like they've been taken to another planet. So that's the inside of the dispensary.
Yeah.
And you can see
the products in the
they're the products. They're the menus. Yeah.
How big can this be?
This could be huge. This could be huge. So, some people liken it to the end of prohibition of alcohol in the 30s in the US. And we look at it now and we think, who's going to be the Johnny Walker of this space, or the Guinness of this space, or the Smirnoff of this space? So, yeah, an absolutely enormous business opportunity here.
That was what I wanted to ask you, because who do you see this shift in legalisation benefiting? In all likelihood, it's just going to be people with investment behind them and, corporate companies that make the money out of it.
Absolutely, yeah. The stakes are getting higher and higher, and I know that a lot of the guys who are home growers find it difficult to reconcile the fact that cannabis is a naturally occurring plant with the fact that big businesses are going to be wanting to make a profit from it.
Yeah.
But really, if we want to realise the potential of cannabis, we need big companies with deep pockets.
When do you think this is likely to come to a head? When do you think there's going to be a genuine discussion as to how, if we proceed, we do proceed with it?
If you were to ask me to hang my hat on a number, I'd say, look, within 3 to 5 years, could I imagine regulated models for dispensing cannabis in the UK? I think that would be reasonable, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers, Gavin.
Nice to meet you.
Gavin was all right, wasn't he? He seems like a good bloke. A good bloke who stands to make a good lot of money if there is a change in legislation. But, if it does become big business, you look at alcohol and tobacco and corporations don't really tend to take into account too much the harm that they do people because it becomes money driven, it becomes about profit. So is this going to help the harm reduction, or is it going to make things worse?
The more I wrestle with it, the more I come back to the question of weed's harmful side and the question of risk. It's not just addiction. One of the most talked about issues is what's been called cannabis-induced psychosis.
Smoking the most potent forms of cannabis has been linked to almost 1/4 of new cases of psychosis.
I didn't like going out anywhere. I was scared of going out. I'd get anxiety.
Some varieties being cultivated contain more of the compound which is linked to psychosis.
You can't always believe what you see on the TV. I want to know how likely a cannabis smoker is to experience conditions like psychosis and what part the drug has to play.
Glove hand, clean hand. Yeah.
Celia Morgan, a psychopharmacologist whose research links between cannabis and mental health, has agreed to talk me through it.
What is the percentage of people that are more likely to develop psychosis?
So smoking cannabis contributes to psychosis, and people suggest that it might bring the onset on, it might bring it on a bit earlier. Amongst heavy smokers, it roughly doubles your risk of developing it.
Yeah.
But actually so many other factors are really important in developing it. One of the most important we know is stress, and things like social deprivation, which are much more key to whether you develop it or not.
Stress and social deprivation go
hand in hand, yeah.
But environment and smoking weed definitely are two contributors, and it's not just a case of weed being the sole cause of the psychosis.
No, but the plant is a very complicated thing that has all of these different chemicals in it. And the tinkering that we've been doing with weed is making it a more dangerous substance. So we need to do a lot more work, I think, to understand exactly how vulnerability interacts with your environment and smoking weed to develop psychosis.
Although most cannabis users won't suffer negative effects, for some, heavy and prolonged use can be the tipping point. So what's in the drug that can be harmful?
The cannabis plant contains around 100 chemicals that are unique to it, and the most common one is THC. So that's the thing that gets people stoned. We found that people who smoked weed that was high in THC makes them anxious, and it can produce these kind of psychotic-like effects. CBD, or cannabidiol, is the second most common chemical in the cannabis plant. It reduces their anxiety, and when it's given to patients with psychosis, it is actually antipsychotic. So it seems to be like a kind of opposite effects to THC.
Yeah.
But they both occur in a naturally growing plant. They're quite
almost. So it's almost a balancing effect, in fact.
Yeah.
Celia tests the levels of THC and CBD in street weed to work out the potency of what's being smoked today.
So, Stephen, do you know what these different types of cannabis are?
Well, that's obviously skunk.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't smell too fruity.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like hash to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, looks like pollen.
Spot on. And would you have a guess at how much THC, which one had the most THC in it?
That would definitely have the most THC in.
Spot on again. This is why you're Professor Green.
Skunk is now the most widely available cannabis in the UK. Often with higher THC and lower CBD, it can be more dangerous to some people's mental health.
People have done some research, and what they've found is that growing cannabis under intense light, and that's how skunk's grown predominantly in this country now, that actually reduces the level of CBD in the plant. So it makes sense that then skunk has actually got lower CBD, because the way we're growing it is actually taking it out of the plant.
How would you feel about it being legalised and regulated? Do you think that would be a step in the right direction or the wrong one?
I think from a scientific perspective, from all the research that I've done over the years in cannabis, I think it would be an entirely positive thing, because you'd be able to regulate the different levels of these chemicals in cannabis, and people would know what they were getting. It's like with alcohol, if people were drinking tequila at the same rate they were drinking wine, then you'd think they'd have more negative effects, and people think the idea of that's ridiculous, but that's the situation we sort of have with cannabis.
Meeting Celia gave me some clarity. People are smoking weed anyway. Shouldn't the priority be to bring it above board in order to minimise harmful effects?
What makes this argument really difficult is that there are people who, after smoking weed, have suffered psychotic episodes. There's no doubt a harmful side to the drug, but Celia raises a really, really good argument for legalisation and regulation. They can control strain, strength, people know what they're smoking. They can make informed decisions about what they consume and what they put in their body, which makes consumption of cannabis safer.
Regulation only comes with legalisation, and that decision lies with those in power. And although almost half of Brits are in favour of legalisation, a recent proposal to change the cannabis laws was read to an almost empty House of Commons. That proposal didn't go any further in Parliament. So, I've come to see former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg to find out what conversations might be going on inside number 10.
Hello, mate.
Hey.
How you doing?
You're right. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
meet you.
Good to meet you.
Thanks for coming here.
What's your stance on legalisation?
You can't ban drugs from existence. They exist, they have been for thousands of years, they've been used for thousands of years, millennia, they'll continue to be used.
Yeah.
And they can be taken responsibly, but they can also do a lot of harm. So it kind of seems to me, making something illegal is what I believe it is, which is the sort of it's the dumb option, because you're basically handing the whole industry to criminals. You've got no interest in reducing the harm to anybody. All they want to do is just rake in profit.
What kind of conversations were there between you and Cameron about this?
Well, to be honest, Cameron and I didn't have that much of a conversation, because he just wasn't interested at all. They just wasn't a priority for them at all. And
you can't be the only MP with these views.
No.
Collectively, strength in numbers, surely something could be done.
There are a fair number of MPs. There are a lot of MPs privately who will tell you this. They just kind of feel, given everything else we've got to deal with, the NHS, immigration, Brexit, it just doesn't, quite understandably, it doesn't get onto the top of people's priorities.
With how progressive certain countries are being now,
yeah.
How far behind do you think we are?
I think we're very, very far behind, and this government's going to do nothing. Nada. Nout. Zip.
Nothing?
No.
You said that with absolute confidence.
Well,
I believe you.
I spent 5 years trying to persuade these people, not least Theresa May, to look more imaginatively at this. It's a cultural thing as much as a legal thing.
possibility of legalisation is clearly some way off. So whilst the law remains unchanged, how is cannabis being policed? Up until now, I've put off meeting the coppers. I've got an uneasy relationship with them. But I've been invited to spend the day with Durham Police to see how they tackled the illegal trade.
We are here today to follow the Durham Police on a police raid, which, if I had a choice, isn't really something I'd be a part of. It's the fact that I've been on the other side of a police raid twice. I was arrested for something that I was never charged with, but the documentary that we are filming is about weed and we have to show every aspect of it, and this is something that is a part of it as much as everything else.
The police have had a tip-off about a suspected cannabis grow.
We've gone to the magistrates with that information. The magistrates have to be happy with the information that we give to them for them to give us a warrant. Because if we knocked on the door and somebody had a cannabis grow in there, the chances of them letting us in are very slim. There's a strong smell of cannabis coming from the address. Members of the public believe that there's cannabis being grown at the address and that drugs are almost ready to be cropped. Ken and John, if you guys want to go to the back, you're going to force entry to the door.
This is quite an interesting angle.
Been on them before?
Am I?
You've been on 20 before?
No, I've been raided twice before.
You've been raided twice?
Yeah. It's when you walk into a locals pub and the music stops.
Right. We leading the way?
If you're caught possessing cannabis, you could face up to 5 years in prison. If it's with intent to supply, 14 years. I've no idea what we're gonna find, but I feel uneasy about being here.
Size? Said we're on the road. What wrong?
Once we arrive, 10 coppers and a firearms officer make their way into the building in search of the cannabis grow.
Can't smell any weed. What's the situation so far?
Well, the house itself is in a poor condition inside. It's obviously, there's a few dogs in there. It's like the dogs have taken hold of the property, really. There is people living in there, albeit there's not people in at the minute.
Sorry, I'll do. I can't work out if they've found what they're looking for, but after a 40-minute search, we return to the station, and I get to see what they picked up.
So there's the results of your raid.
That's the result of it. There's not an awful lot in there. People may look at it and sort of think, well, it's an absolute waste of time. But it's the information that comes to that's come to us, and we've acted on it.
Because if someone just smelt someone smoking a spliff, that wouldn't be reason enough for you to obtain a warrant to raid an address, would it?
I mean, if we knew what was in there, we don't know until we go and do it. It's obviously a lot better for us.
What I'm trying to distinguish is if I'm smoking a spliff in my back garden and someone smells it and goes to a police station, am I then likely to be raided on the chance that there might be a grow in my house?
It depends what they're saying. Are they smelling it intermittently? Is the smell there all the time? Somebody may be under the impression that there's a lot more in there than what there actually is. That's what's turned out on this occasion. Until we go into an address, we don't know.
The person in question could be brought in and charged, but in this instance, they receive a warning for possession. Quite a lot of effort for a small amount of weed. The police thought they were going to bust a massive grow. I almost felt a bit sorry for them. Though in their defence, a real change is underway here, and the police are being encouraged to change the way they police cannabis. I've taken a short drive to meet Durham's Police and Crime Commissioner, Ron Hogg, the man spearheading a new strategy.
Hello.
Hi there.
How you doing? I'm Stephen.
Good to meet you, Stephen. Ron.
Ron, nice to meet you. Cheers. What is your stance on it?
And the police force today, we actually shape our responses in what we call threat, risk and harm. And really, so an individual cannabis user doesn't pose a great threat, risk, or indeed do they do any particular harm to individuals. So therefore, from that point of view, let's not actually go there and let's not tackle that. What we want to focus on are the guys who are making the big money out of it, you know, the suppliers, the producers of cannabis, and these are the guys we want to take out.
I'm shocked to hear that from you.
Well, no,
I really am. You seem like a decent bloke, and I know like you can't tie every copy with the same brush.
Yeah,
but I am honestly. You're you're showing genuine compassion, which is not, to be honest, not what I expected.
We had to really think about it very hard and clearly, because we know, statistics tell you, send someone to prison, it's going to cost up to £50,000, £60,000 a week to look after them. You release them, and actually, most of these individuals within 12 months, 62, 63%, will have reoffended. So it's a different approach.
Now the police have announced a more lenient approach to small-scale cannabis growers and users, a group taking advantage of this at the Teesside Cannabis Club. They have a healthy dialogue with the police and they agreed to meet me, openly and undisguised. The club is an 83-strong collective who grow cannabis for personal use. Trevor, Michael and Simon are three mates who grow theirs together.
What conversations have you had with Durham Police directly, and what have they said to you you can get away with?
What they've said, the official policy is that they will act on complaints only. Now, if you're being a sod and making your neighbours' lives hell with people coming and going because you're dealing left, right and centre, you deserve to have the coppers come through your door. If you're somebody who's grown for medicine or just to be able to chill out, whatever, without causing your neighbours any hassles, then why should the police come through your door? It's a far better way of dealing with them than putting them through a criminalisation process.
How many of you have been criminalised?
That's one of the reasons why I set up Teesside Cannabis Club. I had over 36 different convictions for cannabis. I'd been raided 9 times for cannabis, and for what I planned, for smoking it, never for intent to supply, just because I was always smoking it. My nickname was Ziggy Mustafa Spliff. I always had a spliff in my mouth, it was just how I was known.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I was never
it was my trademark, for people to know you. It's your trademark, you always have a spliff hanging out your mouth.
It all seems quite progressive, and the club members stick carefully to what they'd say is a small-scale operation, for personal use only. 9 plants per person.
It's like Aladdin's cave.
After you.
Ooh, it's bright in there, isn't it?
It is.
How many strains have you got in here at the moment?
I have, as I say, the Psychoberry coming down, the Love Cup, the Chem 91, just nice heavy indica, I like that of a night time. The White Russian, AK-47 Cross White Widow, the 90s one, chills you right out. I'm pretty sure there's a WD-40 and what was the other one? I can't remember.
You've lost me already anyway. I'm never going to remember all them, but it sounds good.
Remember, I'm working as a collective, so under the collective rules, I could effectively be working with 27 plants. The only secret to growing your own in Durham right now is being a good neighbour. Yeah, so my neighbours know I grow my own. They know I'm not a bad guy. They have been very, very supportive. I've been very surprised, actually.
They got a good deal, haven't they? I mean, the guy's got a grow right next to his blimmin' bed, in his bedroom, with God knows how many strains. He lost me after AK-47 or whatever he had in there. It seems progressive to me. It seems like a better way to police things because they're not doing any harm. If there's no victim, there's no crime, essentially. And who are they hurting? No one. It seems like a really sensible way to police the drug as opposed to arresting people for personal use. Baby steps in the right direction? Maybe? Drum roll. What's the decision? Am I for or against? I started this completely open-mindedly. I've got loads of information. I've heard so many arguments for and against, for and against, for and against, for and against. My tiny little brain is suffering. But I think what it has to come down to is, are people safer if it's legalised? Yes, because they have more information available about what they're going to consume and therefore can make a more educated decision, which means that people are safer, which would lead to harm reduction. Let's legalise weed.